Welcome to the 700 Club. Iran's fingerprints of terror are all over the Middle East. And that's what America's ambassador to the United Nations is now telling the world.
Nikki Haley just revealed evidence that proves the Islamic Republic is violating UN resolutions. It could be a sign that the Trump administration is heading for a showdown with Iran in 2018. Jennifer Wishon is in Washington with more.
When you look at this missile, this is terrifying. This is absolutely terrifying.
Standing in a military hangar just outside the Beltway, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley invited the world to see evidence of Iran's reckless and deadly behavior.
These are the recovered pieces of a missile fired by Houthi militants from Yemen into Saudi Arabia.
Their target? The airport in Riyadh, a place that processes 10,000 civilian passengers each day.
The weapons might as well have had "Made in Iran" stickers all over it.
Just imagine, she says, if the truck-sized fragments had been aimed at a U.S. airport. Haley's move marks the most aggressive U.S. effort to substantiate its claim that Iran is funneling weapons to the Houthis, Shiite rebels aligned with Iran who have gained a lot of ground in Yemen.
It's hard to find a conflict or a terrorist group in the Middle East that does not have Iran's fingerprints all over it.
While many world leaders criticized President Trump for decertifying the Iran nuclear deal, Haley says some are starting to come around.
Now they actually see that the president was right.
Although Iran's missile building and exportation of terrorism isn't covered in the nuclear deal, it does violate a UN Security Council resolution and substantiates the fears of those who oppose the nuclear deal.
Iran has hidden behind the nuclear deal, constantly threatening to get out of it. But these are the things they're doing while we're all looking the other way.
Iran called Haley's evidence fake and fabricated. On Twitter, Iran's foreign minister compared it to that of former UN Ambassador Colin Powell's proof of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. However, Haley says the U.S. is already building an international coalition around its evidence.
Everybody has tiptoed around Iran in fear of them getting out of the nuclear deal, and they are allowing missiles like this to be fired over to innocent civilians and hurt, and that is what has to stop.
Failing to check Iran now, Haley says, may mean enabling another North Korea in the future. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
There's been a proxy war going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran over Yemen. And when you hear about the nation of Yemen, a lot of Americans don't even know where it is. I've got a map for you. I want to show you why this is so strategic. There's Yemen, but what's more strategic than just that nation is its proximity, because it's on the other side of the Mandeb Strait. Now, that is a very narrow body of water, and you can stand in Yemen and fire a rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG, and take out an oil tanker. It's that narrow. Its nickname is the Gate of Tears. And the reason it's called the Gate of Tears is so many ships have run aground at the Mandeb Strait. It's very narrow. Just north of it is the Suez Canal, and it's one of the major shipping lanes. So you have the Suez Canal at the north, Mandeb Strait at the south, but then we've all heard of the Strait of Hormuz, which is right off the coast of Iran. What the game here is how can Iran shut off Saudi Arabian oil to Western markets? That's the game. That's what Iran is trying to do. If they can control Yemen, they control the Mandeb Strait. They already control the Strait of Hormuz. And anytime they want to, they can shut off the oil supply, the oil coming from Iran, from Iraq, from Saudi Arabia, and choke the world's oil markets. That's the deal. That's the game that they've been playing, and we need to wake up and recognize what they're doing. This is a strategic play on their part in order to control the world's oil supply. If they're successful in this and able to cut it off, just imagine what would happen to the world economy. That literally we would have an oil gun pointed at our heads, and if we don't do what they want, all our economies go into complete disarray. So that's the game plan. That's what they're up to, and we need to wake up and pay attention to it. Well, in other news, congressional Republicans have been blocked from restoring free speech to pastors. Charlene Aaron has that story from the CBN newsroom. Charlene?
Gordon, it was a measure that would have allowed churches and ministries to speak out about politics, but it has just been stripped from the final tax reform bill in Congress. The battle is all about the Johnson Amendment, which blocks nonprofit groups from talking about political candidates. Republicans were trying to repeal that amendment, but the Senate parliamentarian says it can't be included in the tax bill. There's still a chance, though, because Vice President Mike Pence may be able to overrule that decision. Meanwhile, the overall vote on the tax reform bill is up in the air. Republican Senator Marco Rubio is refusing to support the bill unless it includes a better child tax credit. Plus, Senator John McCain is in the hospital, and Republicans can only afford to lose 2 votes or the bill is blocked. And now to the fight over the future of the Internet. The Federal Communications Commission has voted to eliminate an Obama administration rule that gave government more control over the Internet. But what does it mean for you? CBN's Eric Rosales explains.
Some say the FCC decision will allow you faster access to your favorite Internet. Critics, however, say it allows big corporations to hold your Internet hostage and make you pay more. Regardless, big changes are ahead. Prior to the FCC vote, protesters complained cable and phone companies would suddenly have greater control over what they see and do online.
You're supposedly supposed to be able to speak freely. You're supposed to have that space to speak. The problem is that when we start putting dollar signs on that, we are now limiting people from having the opportunity to not only give information, but also to receive information.
The broadband industry maintains your experience on the web will not change. The FCC commissioner says the previous rules stifled the free market.
This decision will not break the Internet. What we are doing is reverting back to the highly successful, bipartisan, governmental approach that existed before 2015.
Consumers still wonder what it means for them. Critics complain the repeal will lead to higher costs and allow companies to force consumers to purchase bundles of websites, much like cable TV providers do for channel packages. Many question if internet broadband speeds might be affected, while giving certain sites priority over others. Supporters argue that didn't happen before the Obama-era regulations and won't happen now.
So what we want to do is we want to keep the investment train rolling, which we've done by rolling back these regulations, which, by the way, are 1934 landline telephone monopoly regulations.
Seton Motley, president of Less Government, says Thursday's vote puts the industry back in the business environment, which led to its greatest growth.
The internet service providers are in the customer service business. If they do not service the customers, they will no longer be in business. That model has worked for 20 years prior to 2015. It will work again just fine now.
It will likely be months before the latest decision takes effect. Attorney generals in several states have threatened to sue the FCC. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
And the National Religious Broadcasters is applauding the FCC's move, but they're also pointing out more needs to be done to fight censorship by big tech companies on the Internet. NRB President Jerry Johnson said, now that the FCC has appropriately reversed course, I urge the people's representatives in Congress to take a closer look at issues like viewpoint censorship. Big players like Twitter, Facebook, and Google have been accused of censoring some Christian and conservative viewpoints. Well, Christian theologian R.C. Sproul has died after a brief illness. Sproul wrote more than 60 books about Christianity, teaching as a devout Calvinist on the sovereignty and holiness of God. He was the founder of Ligonier Ministries. Months ago, the ministry had planned a radio broadcast for today that features one of his teachings on heaven. That was planned before they even knew he was sick. Sproul was hospitalized in early December after respiratory problems. He died Wednesday in a Florida hospital. He was 78 years old, and a memorial for Sproul will be held on December 20th. A week after President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, Israelis gathered to celebrate the 100th anniversary of another Jerusalem milestone, when Britain gained control of the holy city. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
A Hanukkah miracle and a Christmas present. That's what Jews and Christians called the 1917 British conquest of Jerusalem. 100 years later, Jerusalem commemorated the victory with a reenactment.
2 weeks before Christmas, And on the first day of Hanukkah, the British Imperial Army entered Jerusalem under the command of General Edmund Allenby.
After General Allenby walked into the Old City through the Jaffa Gate, he came here to the Tower of David and received the keys to the city, marking the end of 400 years of Ottoman rule. Henry Allenby, a relative of General Allenby, read from the same declaration of 1917.
Every sacred building, monument, holy spot, shrine, traditional site of whatsoever form of these three religions will be maintained and protected.
General Allenby, he was a great military man who conquered the land of Israel and understood our city, Jerusalem, and its role in the world.
The anniversary celebration also welcomed a new exhibit at the Tower of David Museum.
It was a moment of hope for the people of Jerusalem who suffered so much from the war, from hunger. They waited for the change.
This wasn't about a demanding surrender of Jerusalem. That's why he got off on a horse. He wanted to show humility.
The great-grandson of Major General John Shea, who accepted the surrender, also joined the celebration.
To be here on the 100th anniversary of the surrender and of Allenby's entry into Jerusalem is very proud-making and also rather humbling.
An important aspect of the victory was Allenby's faith.
General Allenby was a devout believer in Yeshua and knew his scriptures extremely well, including the prophecies of Jerusalem. And when he knew when the Lord gave him the prophecy of Isaiah 31:5,
like birds flying about, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending, he will also deliver it. Passing over, he will preserve it.
He was given the idea of planes flying over and dropping leaflets that said, "Leave the city now." So that's why he was able to take it out without destruction, as the prophecy said. Without firing one gunshot, he walked into the city.
Ken Thompson's grandfather helped conquer the city under Allenby.
To me, it has a lot to do with the fact that Allenby was a believer, that he knew his scripture, and my grandfather got to be there, was there with that. It was part of the history.
General Allenby had a gift for Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat.
100 years ago, I stood here and I received the key to this wonderful city. And I think that 100 years later, it's about time that I return it. Good for you. So it's a little bit rusty, but you know, keep it, watch it, it's the only copy. So to another 100 wonderful years here in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem's Old City.
God bless Jerusalem. Gordon?
One of the things that General Allenby did was he got off his horse and walked through the gate. He said, my Savior rode in on a donkey. I'm not about to ride into Jerusalem. I'm going to get off my horse and I'm going to walk in. In the current debates about Jerusalem, about Israel, about the West Bank, about the Palestinian people, we need to recognize 100 years ago, Britain conquered Jerusalem, conquered Israel, and took it from the Ottomans, who had controlled it for 400 years. And along with that conquering came the Balfour Declaration, where they said, as a nation, we're going to dedicate ourselves to creating a homeland for the Jewish people. That was then taken up by the League of Nations and put into international law at the San Remo Conference. And then the UN adopted all of the League of Nations resolutions, including that one. So when you hear that somehow Israel is illegal, no, it's not. Under international law, it was designed and put into place by both the League of Nations and then by the UN. And it all goes back to this day, 100 years ago, when Allenby walked into Jerusalem.